Thank you. Welcome. This is a great audience, and as always, Nicole and team build a great case for adopting DevOps using some really strong empirical data. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit and talk about how organizations embrace DevOps in a scenario where they've already either are leveraging Agile or considering adopting Agile practices. So before we begin though, we have an awesome panel, Wayne, Aruna, and Sandeep. I'm going to let them spend 1 minute each to introduce themselves. Starting with Wayne.
Aruna, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you. Aruna Ravichandran, I'm the Vice President of Marketing for DevOps at CA Technologies. I've been in this DevOps space for almost 2 decades or so. Started my career as an engineer at Hewlett-Packard. Grew into an engineering director and then moved on to what I call the darker side of the business, and I've been in marketing for the last 15 years or so. And I'm very passionately involved in the DevOps discipline across the board, more from a thought leadership perspective. I talk to several different clients worldwide, understand how they're actually evolving their DevOps implementation. Wrote a book with 2 other co-authors about a year and a half ago. If you Google my name, you'll be able to find the book, an ebook version of the book, or if you want a hard copy, you can actually purchase it from Amazon. Thank you.
Thanks, Aruna. My name is Sandeep Dhingra. I am part of IBM GTS services. I head consulting and strategic alliances. My background is really network, and for the last many years, I've been focusing on network transformation, SDN, NFV, cloud. And as part of that, I do work with lots of clients because specifically if you look at telco and service provider, they are going through this huge transformation in the network space. And part of that transformation is operations transformation, because I'll state that and I'll kind of repeat that few times. Network ops is broken, and that is why DevOps for networks is really needed now. Before joining IBM, I spent a couple of years in Huawei. I basically ran their SDN and NFV technology practice for fixed networks, telco. And then before that, I spent 15 years in Cisco, running architecture and design, migration and IPv6 practices. So I'm really network architect by profession, focused a lot on SDN and NFV, and again, I believe operations is the key to this transformation. Currently, that is what is holding everybody back. So I'll try and give the network perspective to DevOps in this discussion. Thank you.
Great.
Let's see if mine works. Here we go. My name is Wayne Ariola. I'm the CMO of Tricentis. I have been in the technology space ever since I started my career. I've been in the software testing space for the last 15 years. I'm the author of a book called Continuous Testing for IT Leaders. It's also available online in PDF form. I got to one-up Aruna here for a second. And you can pull that thing down if you want. It's also on Amazon. I guess the one thing I'd like to open with here is that ever since I started my career in this space, we've been transforming. And we're taking the next step now. And that step happens to be now named DevOps, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I think as a panel, we should try to predict by the end of this thing, what's next? Challenge you guys. Chris?
All right. I also have a book, but it's about SharePoint, so I don't recommend reading it. When I was a SharePoint developer, so that's embarrassing. All right, so I'm going to introduce myself now that I've gotten out of SharePoint. I am an analyst for Fixate, focusing on the DevOps market, and editor of a site called sweetcode.io. So to begin this conversation, because it really is about the intersection between Agile and DevOps, and you might say that the DevOps purist, which I am one, believes that Agile in a sense goes away. So that's the first question we have to ask is there a connection between Agile and DevOps, and can they actually work together? So let's start with Aruna.
Okay. I absolutely think that Agile and DevOps can actually work together. They're very, very complementary in my mind. Agile is about taking dev work and breaking it up into chunks and enabling a lot of agility so that you increase dev velocity. And if you think about DevOps, it's about breaking down the silos across the software delivery lifecycle. But both of the paradigms with both Agile and DevOps have certain common goals. One main goal, which both Agile as well as DevOps tries to embrace, is being able to build better apps with the right quality much more faster. And if you think about the underlying common principles, both of the technologies have three common principles in my mind. One is about how do you actually change the mindset within an organization. Nicole actually talked about that a lot around embracing cultural transformation. Both Agile and DevOps require a huge mindset change in terms of making that real. The second one is about the process transformation, or implementing best practices across the board. And again, that requires a big mindset shift within an organization. And again, that's on something which both have in common. And last but not the least, you need the technology as a key enabler to basically embrace both Agile as well as DevOps. So in my mind, it's absolutely complementary. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Wayne, what do you think?
So I don't think you can be at a conference like this, especially with a DevOps track, and try to deny the fact that Agile and DevOps have a home together, right? Let's just start there. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I find as I speak to clients across the board is there's one thing in common. The mindset shift is absolutely imperative, but if you ask most of the people why, they don't know. They don't understand why I have to go through this mindset shift. Maybe it is a more incremental shift in technology, like we got to implement CI. Maybe it is the thing that they say, hey, we're going to Agile or scaling Agile. Or maybe it's the thing that they say, no, my organization is now DevOps. By the way, I hear that a lot. We are now DevOps. And it's like this point in time where they weren't DevOps, and then magically they have become DevOps, or at least put that mantra into the ether there at the organization. So the main point here is I think we need to take a huge step back and redefine for each organization, what is it we are trying to achieve? What is it are we trying to move forward? Nicole mentioned, hey, this is all about getting to market faster with really transformative ideas associated with software. And that is absolutely true. But to each organization, this is a different journey and a different paradigm. And I think we miss it at times. Us marketers, I'll have to say, us marketers are out there really putting terms out there at times, and they get consumed, and that's fantastic they get consumed. But actually laying the foundation for why that shift is required seems to be the common missing point out there.
Yeah, so you make an interesting case is that it's not necessarily Agile bucket, DevOps bucket, right? It's digital transformation and focusing on better software quality. Now, what's interesting is when you enter Sandeep's world with hardware and software and the complexities around that and the life cycle of this technology, as we were sitting at lunch, you explained a whole bunch of cool stuff about how they embrace DevOps and really where Agile comes into play there, and it's completely different.
Yeah, first thing I want to say is I've just decided to write a book. I'm going to start today.
It better be done by the time we finish.
First, I'm wearing a suit. Everybody else is wearing a jean. Everybody else has written a book. I'm not, so I'm kind of feeling different. I do have a book, but it's not on DevOps or engineering. It's actually in Hindi poetry. If any of you interested, it's $5 on Amazon. So I just wanted to get a few bad poems out of my system. See, again, I'll give a network background, a network lens to this, right? This is the reality. 87% of work done in network is done through CLIs still. $1 of CapEx typically generates $4 of extra OpEx expense today. That is because most of the work is still manual and siloed, right? Engineering and development and testing and ops team are totally separate. Most of the world, I'm not talking AT&T and Verizon of the world, but they started the journey for a while back. Now, it still takes anywhere between 12 to 18 months to deliver a service that constitutes of various software. Point being, again, operations is broken, and that is the reason service providers and telcos, they are looking mostly at DevOps, because there, in that world, DevOps is perceived to be complete, where agile principles, agile manifestos are part or component of that, and then you basically add CI and CD, and then add operations. That completes the life cycle for them. So the clients across the globe that I have talked to, they are really gearing and moving towards DevOps as an end-to-end life cycle. And this is how the standards body and open source is moving in that direction as well.
Great. So we have somewhat a consensus on the fact that DevOps and Agile can be friends. And now what I want to explore is, with DevOps and the marketing terminology and so forth, things like two-pizza teams and continuous delivery and microservices, et cetera, and also what Nicole said about organizational structures. It seems like in some respects, the question isn't process and practice, it also has to do with the organization. And so how do these concepts like shift left and two pizza teams and DevOps and Agile play together? Go ahead, Aruna.
So if you think about the DevOps lifecycle, as I've talked to a lot of practitioners in the industry across small, medium, and large companies, one of the areas where I see most customers actually talk to me about is where is the actual bottleneck when you think about DevOps. There was a research done by Computing Magazine last year, and they surveyed close to about 7,000 practitioners worldwide, and they actually learned from that particular survey was that QA was the number one bottleneck if you think about DevOps, right? See, believe it or not, testing as a discipline has existed very since the inception of when somebody actually wrote their first code. But you would not think that testing is a manual process, but if you talk to people, they'll tell you that testing still continues to be a manual process. And so 64% of the people who actually took the survey said that QA was a fundamental bottleneck in the world of DevOps. So what I've seen is this whole concept of shift left. And when I think about shift left, it's this emerging discipline called continuous testing. Testing is no longer a boxed event which happens at one part of an SDLC. It's now transforming into a discipline which plays across the entire software delivery life cycle. You don't think about testing when it comes down into QA. You think about testing right from the time you conceptualize an idea. When you think about planning, you think about requirements, and then it goes into the development team's work streams, and testing needs to be embedded as a part of that. So continuous testing in my mind is an emerging discipline, and it's going to play a big role in terms of being able to shift left. And having talked about shift left, there is also another principle which I've seen. It's also about shift right. It's about testing in production. And you can see more and more companies like Facebook and Google, they actually do testing in production, right? So this is all about being able to embrace canary deployments. And so all of these principles are actually changing the discipline around Agile as well as with respect to DevOps.
So I'll make an argument that since 80% of testing is still manual, everyone's been testing in production anyways. And that's the fact of it right now, right? So everyone is testing in production, and I think it's the way to go, in my humble opinion. So let me go back to just another analogy here. Who here was around for the supply chain automation wars in the 80s, where supply chain and supply chain optimization was one of the key conversations that people are having? And people were trying to, we got one in the audience. I can't see past you, by the way, sir, so there could be more. So what had happened was people tried to actually eliminate the constraint of the entire supply chain, and they started to go back and back and back and back and tried to free up all the constraints associated with getting physical product or discrete product to stores, to people, to their customers faster. We have ignored this concept in development and testing for ages, and we still battle it. And we're doing it now, again, trying to actually propose this with shift left. And I think it's a good thing to do. It's a good thing to actually challenge our organization to try to understand how to continuously expand out that idea of removing the constraint or the thing that's taken us the most time within that software delivery cycle or software delivery chain. However, what's going on today is we're still being really impeded by the fact that people don't understand why the heck, I was going to say something else there, why the heck we're doing it in the first place. So the actual impetus for change is not very clear in organizations today, and that's the one thing that's holding them back. So when I take this concept and what we learned from supply chain optimization techniques that went through, the fact of the matter is that automation can get you so far, but the goal of the organization, or that overarching goal of the organization, is what really pulled people through. We solve that problem, we know what constraints to go look for. Again, in Nicole's slide, she said, look for the constraints and then rinse and repeat. I don't have any hair anymore, so I don't know what rinse means, but I know what repeat is. It means that you have to go find what that actual biggest barrier to achieving that speed is. And today, I'd agree with Aruna, it's software testing. Number one barrier to speed is testing.
Great. So, in the software world, which you two are both very familiar with, and building applications and deploying them, it's very opportunistic. So organizations can, embrace new processes and so forth. Now, Sandeep, are you seeing the same thing when it comes to these types of practices? Like, are your customers and the organizations you work with, are they also bringing in shift left and these other concepts, or are they adopting DevOps out of necessity, versus being opportunistic and just wanting to move forward?
So I'll give two different takes on this, one from the network side and one from the cloud side. One from the network side, I would say, from a testing and continuous testing is even bigger bottleneck in networks, because you cannot currently easily carve out a virtual or overlay network from a production network. You have to worry about fault, capacity, accounting, performance, security, lots of things. And when you move things, all of these things are needed for application. So and then you have SLAs, so you really can't create a test environment, so to speak. It's very, very difficult, especially because it's not even fully virtualized, because you have physical elements here. So we are not there yet. Continuous testing is an absolutely dire need, but it's a journey. In terms of augmenting the overall process, I'll take an example of what we do in the cloud area. What we have found is, what IBM takes when we talk to our clients, large clients, is that in addition to Agile and DevOps, we add two more components. One is at the front end, which is what we call design thinking, which is basically before you get to the requirement space. And this is an interesting concept. If you're not familiar, you can find it out. Basically is that you actually work with client to define the personas, who wants what, the actual specific personas, and then define what does that who want, right? Before you get into the requirement phase. So really deep design thinking front end before you begin Agile. So that's one thing. Second, between Agile and DevOps, you fit in Lean. That is the two pizza concept, right? So this is what, like four process. You have Agile. So we start with design thinking, Agile, Lean, and then DevOps. This is what we are doing. There's a very interesting case study. It's on the web on AmericanAirlines.com that IBM did. So there are more details, and that's where this thing was applied and very successfully.
Yeah, so you literally just described delivery chain where Agile and DevOps work together, which is great. So you're kind of selling me a little bit.
Can I ask Sandeep a question real quick, though? When you get down into that kind of network orientation...
This was not in the syllabus.
It wasn't? No, I know. Yeah, this pre-planned stuff goes out the window, right? So when you guys are looking at design thinking and some of those upfront agile practices, how much is really the dev team involved, or the architecture team in that level of discussion today, from your perspective?
See, it's not only internal. Most design workshop that we do, design thinking workshop, we involve client in multiple. So they think about their 15, 16 team, and it is never done by anybody like an IBM VP or a customer VP. There are design facilitators who specialize in the design methodology, and they would run the workshop. So yes, there are stakeholders from architecture, from operations, and if you really see a lot of these things, if you talk to clients, the driver is business model change. Wonderful. So there are typically their business people as well, because as you move from subscription as a service model, they need to be there as well. And I have been in many of these design workshops. They are just fabulous. And again, I'm not really talking IBM, but just the design thinking as a process is very critical in my mind.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so one of the things that I've seen when it comes to DevOps and convincing organizations to embrace digital transformation, DevOps, it's oftentimes a exercise in counseling more than anything. And one of the things that you'll hear, and I think Nicole alluded to this as well, is that organizations will say, well, we don't need DevOps because we're already doing Agile. So let's talk a little bit, maybe, what's your advice? What would be your pitch to them that they should take the next step, and then you can also throw in your prediction of what's next after that. But why should they continue the evolution from Agile to DevOps?
So before I talk about the advice, I wanted to actually share a stat on why I actually think that Agile and DevOps is like peanut butter jelly. It's better together. So we actually conducted a research in order to understand for our own needs, because within CA Technologies, we are a $4.2 billion company, and we sell all the tool sets in order to enable clients to do their DevOps implementations as well as supporting Agile transformation. And we wanted to understand, talking to customers and prospects, whether Agile by itself, what are the fundamental benefits, business benefits, what are the benefits with DevOps, and how would it do well together if you put DevOps and Agile together as holistically. We did a research with Coleman Parks, an external vendor, across 1,770 IT professionals. When I say IT, I mean DevOps and the DevOps professionals, across 21 different geographies and 10 different verticals. And there were some interesting stats which I actually picked up, I wanted to share with you guys. We did it based upon business metrics, and what we found was that customers who implemented Agile alone saw 23% improvement into reduction in IT-related costs, but when they added DevOps to the mix, it actually reduced the cost by almost 39%, which means that they got 65% incremental reduction in IT-related costs. And if you look at another metric, which is new business growth, which is all around impact on top-line revenues, Agile alone basically gave them a 24% boost on their top line, and if you added DevOps to the mix, it was a 63% incremental. The third business metrics was operational efficiency, and that was around, if you just have Agile, there was a 29% improvement, and you add DevOps to the mix, it was a 41% incremental. And last but not the least, why are we doing DevOps? Why are we doing Agile? It's all about transforming your businesses in order to provide a phenomenal customer experience. How do you measure customer experience? It's through Net Promoter Score. It's one of the stats where you can actually measure the end result of your application. And we saw that there was an improvement of 34% using Agile, and when you added DevOps to the mix, there was the better together story was 44%. So simplistically, what I would say to clients, the most important fact, whether you're doing Agile separately or DevOps or together, the most important thing is the mindset change. It's the big part of the cultural transformation. Wayne talked about that, and that's absolutely core across the board. And then if I have to take one step lower, I would say create your CI/CD pipeline. Take an equivalent of a Hello World application and put it through the pipeline. And as it goes through the pipeline, you'll actually understand where your constraints are, where your bottlenecks are, and then you'll figure out where you need to rework the system so that you can, like he said, rinse and repeat, so that you can identify your bottlenecks.
So I would say one of the big buzzwords, again, is this term automation, which kind of freaks me out because automation, haven't we been doing that for the last 40 years, automation? But it's back, right? And what does it mean? And it's confusing, I think, to a lot of people because they think they've been automating time and time again. Yet, when you get down to the bottom line of it, the biggest problem that we face is the organizational hierarchy that needs to be torn down and rebuilt, predicated on that new goal of the organization. Now, let's call that new goal digital transformation, okay? For lack of better terms, let's just call it digital transformation. So if that new goal is digital transformation, you really got to tear the organization down. I mean, tear it down. Get rid of the hierarchy, get rid of the decision process, get rid of the actual highly structured approach to approvals, because that's what's holding everything back. And it's holding back the concept of automation as well. So when I go back down and I look at this idea of Agile and DevOps, and by the way, some people are allergic to peanut butter, Aruna. But whatever it is, chocolate or peanut butter or jelly, whatever it is better together. But if the organizational hierarchy and structure isn't there to mirror the actual business objective, it's done. It's toast. You're just going to be spending a lot of money, hopefully not with a giant consulting firm, and throwing that money away because you're going to have to do it again.
All right, you have 30 seconds.
So I wanted to give a big analogy, but now I'll move quickly. See, easier said than done. Organization changes and boundaries. When you have human beings involved with agendas and this thing, it's not done that easily. That's what I'm finding. And in my world, especially in telcos, these are very, very rigid boundaries, and it's very difficult to change. It's very, how do I put it? This is a bottleneck, and I think it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, and I think, as you told me earlier, that at some point in time it may just be necessity, and sometimes it's messy. Yeah. And that's just the reality of it, and I think you were pointing to that. Aruna, where would somebody find that report that you were talking about with the stats? Because you had a lot of great stats.
It's on ca.com. Put a search on Agile. If not, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or through Twitter, and I'll send you the link to the report.
Great. All right. Well, just quickly go down, give one last word of thought. You have 10, 15 seconds to say, what's next, because I like that. And then we'll wrap it up. So go ahead.
So the next buzzword is obviously going to be digital transformation. So that's my prediction on what we're going to be marketing on in the next 6 months. So everything will arc into that. Chris, thank you very much, by the way. Last thought.
No problem.
I would say, the next thing with respect to DevOps is how transformations are going to happen given AI-driven applications or blockchain applications. There is going to be a major shift in the market because those AI-driven applications, machine learning applications, are going to bring about a different kind of a twist, because those applications are going to be changing even more when compared to the microservices and the Gen 2, Gen 1 applications. So I would say there is going to be a lot of emerging new practices which we need to fine-tune and change within DevOps as well as Agile in order to support those applications.
I fully agree with Aruna on this, and specifically I think in future, AI, without AI and ML, you will not be able to manage, you will not be able to function. So that really becomes an existential thing, right? The scale and volume that we are really talking about, cannot be driven by humans alone. So I definitely agree with Aruna on that. I'm not 100% sure on blockchain, because in my world, I have not yet found concrete use cases and applications that are deployable in the network space, but I'm looking into it and definitely trying to learn.
So now you have to come next year, watch the same panel, and maybe those are the topics we'll be talking about. Well, join me in thanking our awesome panel. Did a great job, great set of knowledge here, and thank you for joining us to explore this topic.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.